light. But I didn't enter. There's this one.
Okay, I thought we would, there's a lot going on with China, as we know from the newspaper. And what I'm going to do is, Bruce, I've heard your concern about the pictures being filmed. Maybe if I put them over on this side. Okay, so I'm starting with Tiananmen, 1989. So we've been looking at the long view of history. Now I'm going to just do the last 30 years or so. And the social contract after Tiananmen was for the Chinese government to have legitimacy. They were going to have to perform. And so the deal was, look, I'll give you a strict security from the top down, and you're going to be allowed to compete for material wealth. That was kind of the same deal that Putin offered 11 years later. So that's the deal that the autocrats make. The Chinese, in particularly during COVID, have really leveraged our problems into their propaganda. Every chance they get, they have shown politicians squabbling and Western democracies being selfish, and they were up to date on our death toll as much as we were, and images of hospitals, patients on emergency rooms, in the Bronx, in Queens, the hospital that was overflowing. Trump holding press conferences and scorning science. And then the protests among the populace here against lockdowns and mandates. All that went mainstream in China. Now, all of a sudden, the shoe's on the other foot as China comes out of zero COVID. They've had huge problems. We don't know what they are. They're a closed society. We have no idea. But there are large numbers, and there's some proof that the Chinese have fudged their statistics. Xi is kind of on his back foot. There's other problems that we covered last time. The unemployment. Look at the cohorts going up. Over 20% of college graduates, and climbing as the economy slows. Are you all seeing the slides?
We didn't see what those colors represented.
I don't see what you're seeing.
Go back.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
I look great.
What's red? What's orange?
The years.
It's not the pencil.
No, it's the years. You can see that the unemployment's gone up year on year in China. And then, but Xi has been very lucky. Yeah, he's got some problems now, but he's had a couple of things tumble his way in relationship to the two biggest countries, America and Russia. This Putin invasion of Ukraine has really turned Russia into a colony of China. China is in the driver's seat now. It's really clear. And this friendship without limits, it looks like China is more submissive than before. Well, what about the United States? Probably the biggest gift to Xi was Trump. And we know that he's had to suffer through Trump's trade war, but leaving the TPP was a huge own goal. Trump shot himself in the foot. TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was meant to exclude China, get all the countries around it to get in a group, come up with standards, and present China with a fait accompli. Do you want to join? This is what you have to do in the way of labor management. So he's been lucky that way, but he's still got problems. Nevertheless, he felt that he was in a position where he could unwind Deng. Deng was all in favor of capitalism. He didn't care what kind of cat it was as long as it could catch a mouse. And under Deng, free enterprise really took off, and a lot of .com and technology millionaires, some billionaires were created. But Xi's thing, he's more a Maoist equality person, and his gimmick was common prosperity. Let's spread the wealth. A little bit in the same vein as our Bernie Sanders, you might say. So there's going to be less private enterprise, and there's going to be more state-owned enterprises. But under state-owned enterprises, the debt in China has climbed and climbed, and there's been corruption in state-owned enterprises. Surprise, surprise. And the banks in particular. So there's a lot of non-performing loans. There was this whole thing about shadow banking that began to be unwound a couple of years ago. But there's still huge problems, to the extent that China has just set up a new super regulator, a super cop, if you will, to unwind the debt. And so I think somebody has raised their hand. Yes.
If they have more state-owned enterprises than privately owned enterprises, are they going to take over the private stuff? Is that what he's planning to do? Or is he just going to continue to support the state-owned and not support the private stuff?
So we had a slide last week that showed that there were some exceptions to state-owned enterprise. There were, I think, biotech, computer technology, that's still being given free rein. But everything else is on the table for state-owned enterprise.
So they'll take it over.
Well, we'll see if they want to. The problem with the state-owned enterprise is a lot of these bank debt has been caused by local governments borrowing money and taking that money and doing the Belt and Road Initiative. And some of that has been very poorly planned. So, yeah, so that's been the problem with state-owned enterprise. There's no free lunch. One thing is bad or the other. International trade. So this is a two-way street. China is cracking down on foreign firms in China. And they in particular are watching to see if any private firms, foreign firms, transgress security laws and communications laws. And so there have been some Western executives that have been arrested. And I don't know if any have been actually sent to jail, but they've certainly been threatened with jail. But why is China doing that? Because we're doing the same thing. More than 9,000 Chinese firms, 9,000 have been hit by Western sanctions. All the times that we and our Congress has identified an industry or a business as being a security threat if they operate in this country, they've been hit with sanctions. So this is very much a two-way street, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. Is try to give China's side of it, because I don't think our press does that very well. Now, in terms of foreign policy in this respect, Trump has doubled down almost Biden has doubled down on Trump's trade war by decreasing China's access. So when they sanction Western business, some of it is in retaliation for what Biden is explicitly doing. Some people have commented that China has actually taken this pretty well. That they were surprised at what Biden did, and they were expecting a greater blowback. So the blowback that we're seeing may not be as much as might have been expected. So obviously, this is a declaration of war, bilateral, but from both sides. But get this, one observer compared what we're doing to China now to what we did to Japan before World War II with the oil embargo, and that didn't end well. The other thing that America's doing is expanding our military, and I'll show you a map in just a second. Biden has also abandoned strategic ambiguity. What a great phrase. He has come out more pugnacious, I guess, thinking that if we're not clear about what our policy is and what we do if China invaded Taiwan, now that they're speaking more belligerently, if we weren't super clear about that, then that might be thought to be a weakness. And I think some of the background of Crimea and Putin is playing out with China. So he's not being ambiguous at all about Taiwan. So you'll remember, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, we talked about Li Shangfu, who is now the defense secretary of China, and how he refused to meet with Lloyd Austin in Singapore. And we looked at what China wants in that situation. And I mentioned to you that Donald Trump had put sanctions on General Lee. And why did he do that? Because Lee had been working with Equipment Development Department, and he purchased some Russian weapons. So that was interpreted by the Trump Defense Department as being belligerent enough to sanction Lee just for buying Russian weapons. And so what was China's response? That was in 2018. 5 years later, they made Li defense minister. So they were not cowed at all by this. And now, surprise, Blinken returns from Beijing empty-handed. Some people have thought that the major goal of Blinken was to reestablish military-to-military communications because of all the close calls we've had on the sea and in the air. Aiko.
So is that guy the one, did he replace Shoigu or whatever his name was?
No, that Shoigu is Russian.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I can understand your confusion because he's Asian, right? Yeah. Who are the throat singers? That's where he's from.
Yeah, Tuvan.
The Tuvan throat singers. So Shoigu is Tuvan. Interesting story about that, but I've got too much to cover. That's what they want. They want for Li to come off of the sanction list, and then we'll talk about military to military safeguards. All right. So just before Blinken was supposed to go, this Cuban controversy popped up. China was discovered to be having spy telecommunications, and that just set off all kinds of alarms. A lot of intemperate language, particularly from our Congress, as you'll see. And their foreign minister, Qin Gang, he's playing the bad cop. He is say, okay, smears not obscure America's deplorable track record of indiscriminate mass spying around the world. Well, it's true. We do comparable stuff to what China is doing and what China was doing with that crazy balloon they floated across. That was pretty weird. But China's the bad. I'm sorry, Gang is the bad cop. So who's the good cop? We met him last time. This is Wang Yi, and I want to clear up something. They're both. He is the foreign minister, Gang, the foreign minister in the bureaucracy. So what's Wang Yi? He is the top diplomat, but he's not a bureaucrat in the government bureaucracy. He's from the Communist Party. And guess what? Communist Party, when there's dual oversight, whoever's in the Communist Party wins. So Wang Yi is playing the good cop, so that's good. The communist is being a good cop as they protest our behavior. The interesting thing, and this is going to happen in San Francisco in November, there's going to be a summit right here in the Bay Area, and it's an opportunity, Wang Yi says, to reconsider a contentious policy. When we were reviewing that special report on what China wants, he was interviewed a lot and said a lot. And what he said at the time was pretty encouraging. And it's nice to report that he's still upbeat, and he just met with Blinken, and a 3-hour meeting, cordial. So keep your eye on Wang Yi You'll see him again in our own Bay Area in November. Congress loses no opportunity to bash China. And I've made the point before that China, observing what's said in America, thinks that any negative utterance represents the government, Biden. But it obviously we know it doesn't. We're polarized. But they don't quite understand that. They think that when Congressman Gallagher starts talking about whitewashing Chinese aggression by going on to Blinken visiting China right after we find out that the Chinese are up to no good in Cuba, he talks about taking the path of surrender or submission. Oh my God. 60 years ago, that's what we learned in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh my gosh. You've seen this slide before. He's in charge of a new China committee, and he believes we're in an existential struggle with China. So I'm just saying there's plenty going on our side, and he is not a moderate at all. He wants to halt investment in trade. He's chided Apple for being dangerously exposed. Ditto Walt Disney for appeasing Beijing's censors, pointing out every rumor that Nike uses forced labor for the cotton that's picked for shoes. And Biden and Blinken should not go hat in hand, but focus on more sanctions, as if 9,000 aren't enough. Unfortunately, the Senate is piling on, and there it's a little bit more bipartisan. But Mark Warner has some negative things to say. And he and Marco Rubio have a pretty close working relationship. So what is the effect on you and me? What is the effect on the population and how we view China? Well, here we've got 40 years of a record. Obviously, when Deng rolled out industry in China, started making our stuff, and the stuff turned out to be pretty good. China's favorability went way up by the end of the 80s. Of course, this is Tiananmen, so it plunges. But it goes up, and there's a little bump in 2018 during Trump. What was that? That's explained by it was clear at that point that China was having some economic difficulties, and we're seen less as a threat. And we had experienced that before with Japan. A long time ago, Japan was buying Rockefeller Center and everything else, and was taking over all our institutions. And that was that way with China for a while, but that was ameliorated when they looked like they were faltering economically. But now look at it; it's just plummeted, and it's the worst it's been. The 84% said they viewed China unfavorably. I'm going to compare. My control group is India, so India only 27% unfavorability, and I'm going to contrast China and India a little bit more. So what went wrong? in 2017, the other thing that happened is she started feeling his oats. China was doing pretty darn well, and he, as a nationalist, proclaimed a new era in 2017 and set economic goals for China in international trade. And this was perceived as challenging us. And this whole business, Deng Xiaoping, you've seen this slide before, I just emphasize, he was wise enough to recognize that China would be perceived as a threat in the West. And he said, keep your ammo dry, bide your time. What we're seeing now is what he counseled his country to avoid. And then here were early suspicions. Those of us that have been in Ramsey's lecture know quite well what 1793 meant. It was the McCartney mission to China, and Britain and the British Empire was really enjoying the tea and the plateware. What do you call that? Porcelain. Thank you. And the problem was balance of payment. So they tried to get China to open their economy to British cotton, I suppose. And the emperor disdainfully said, we don't need anything from Britain. But the tone of the meeting was already off on the wrong foot. McCartney kneeled, but he didn't kowtow. And he was supposed to have kowtowed. That's what the Chinese were expecting him to lie face down, prostate, and not prostrate. Thank you. And he didn't do that. Today, leaping forward, the same kind of mistrust between us is percolating, which some of this seems like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you see the early signs of China bashing, you just kind of go, uh-oh. And so Huawei, geez, they could use their telecom equipment to spy on us. Some of that is reasonable, but some of it is overblown. And again, we're reviewing Chinese investments in American companies for the least reason, particularly in Silicon Valley. And even Harvard professors have been targeted. Chinese American Harvard professors have been punished for talking to Chinese diplomats, and they're under the suspicion of collaborating. Indian firms do the same thing, but they don't face such scrutiny. All right, so the difference between between chess and the Chinese game Go. It's a little bit like checkers, but much, much more complicated. And the idea of it is to corner your opponent and limit their flexibility to move. So you're supposed to block them so the opponent can't move. So you basically surround and smother your opponent. All right, well, let's look at some maps here. How do you think China feels when they read what our military strategy is? That we have the first island chain strategy, and the second island chain strategy. This is a lot like the game Go. In chess, we just try to capture the king and be done with it. But in Go, you try to limit and surround them. And so they look out and at the first island chain that ranges from Japan to Okinawa to Taiwan to the Philippines, down to Malaysia, and they feel, hey, we're a great power. How's come in the South China Sea we can't build some islands? Right? They've built artificial islands. American ships steam through here all the time, demonstrating that we can under international rules to keep the trade lanes open. But let's look at the second chain, which goes from Tokyo to Guam, where Jeannie has lived, by the way, I think over 10 years, and all the way down to Papua New Guinea and Australia. So here, China is even concerned enough about this that they have started dabbling around in Papua New Guinea, created a free trade pact with them. And here's our friend Wang Yi. So the first ring, Japan, Okinawa, their American Marines are there doing military maneuvers. In Taiwan, there's something called a drawdown of weapons from our own arsenal that Taiwan can do, and we've done that for Ukraine. So there's a lot of drawing down going on from our supplies. And the Philippines, after a few rough years with Duarte, has agreed to give us access back to the bases. We're hardening the defenses of Guam, and Australia has just received the promise of getting nuclear-powered submarines in an organization called AUKUS. What does AUKUS mean? It just is AU, Australia. I'm sorry, Australia, UK, US, AUKUS. And here are the heads of government from AUKUS. And this made the French mad because the French had a preliminary deal with Australia to make the nuclear submarines, but now they're not going to be involved at all. So AUKUS is something else that is on China's mind. And here's Lloyd Austin looking on. And these are nuclear attack submarines, So this makes China nervous. If things weren't bad enough with the first and second rings, there's something called the Quad that pulls in India. And we've known from a couple of years ago the border warfare that goes on at 14,000 feet in the Himalayas between China and India, who are in, what's the name of that province? Lock. It'll come to me. There's a very, in northern India, there's a very high altitude province where Yeah.
Janie went.
and where Janie went on the dental mission. Okay. Just a side note on India, the most popular leader in the world, probably because of India's promise. They're just beginning their takeoff. China beat them to it, but India is starting their takeoff, and Modi can take credit for introducing free enterprise and boosting it. So this is the cover of the last week's Economist, that America's new best friend is the Indian tiger. And we know that India does not love the West. We've seen that in their ambivalence about Ukraine. But we need India, and we've got some advantages. So India is the largest contributor to the immigrant flow in the world, even more than Mexico. China doesn't have as many immigrants, but the important thing is the destination. China's not even on the list. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. China is adverse to immigration. They're very, let's say, insular. They're paying the price for geography. They're at the end of the road, end of the Silk Road. So there's not much crossroad activity like there has been in India for 3,000 years. Like there's been in Ukraine, as we talked when we did Ukraine. They're a crossroads of Europe and the Silk Road. They're a northern terminus of the Silk Road. So China's not one of the destinations because they're not welcoming. We're second, so that's good. The Arabs got the money, so they've got us surrounded here. So this is an assertion made. The India's diaspora is the largest and most influential in history. So this is the kind of thing our study group likes to chew over, right? These audacious statements. And let's see why they would dare make this assertion. Yes, Aiko.
My sister said to repeat the question because they can't hear. But I mean, we get India's top grade people. Dubai gets them to do manual labor, right?
Right.
I mean, they've got the largest immigrant people, but they don't stay in UAE, do they? Like they stay here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's another statistic I found really interesting. I think Indian immigrants to this country, the breakdown of upper caste to lower caste, caste is still a thing. Apparently, it's more like 15% are lower caste. 85% of Indian immigrants that come here are from the Brahmin class or the administrator class. They're high caste Indians. And this one commentator said it's almost like they go to education and go to school with the idea of immigrating to America.
Who's third after UAE, America, and who's third? Russia or I can't remember. Saudi Arabia.
So we're surrounded by Arabs.
And they probably don't let in. All of those countries don't let them stay, right? Like we do. They probably get the lower classes. who work
Yeah, that
more
may,
than anything else.
yeah.
Do we want to go back and join the TPP?
Well, Biden's trying. He started a new organization. Rather than going back to join the TPP, he just started a new organization with the same idea. It's too late. It's too late. We are not reliable partners.
So what are we, an organization of one?
I don't know how many are in his. I think people join out of duty. Yeah, courtesy. All right, so let's back this up. 73% of Indian immigrants are on skilled specialty visas. The best graduates from the Indian tech institutes of technology. 36% of the top graduates, as measured by exam performance, immigrate. And if you take the 100 best individual students, 62 of them, 62, have immigrated, and they all come mostly to America, where they make it big. The chiefs of Adobe and Alphabet, which is Google, essentially, IBM and Microsoft are all of Indian descent. We saw in the AUKUS photo that the Prime Minister of Britain is Indian, Rishi Sunak, and there are 19 people of Indian heritage in the House of Commons. Australia has got 6. We've got 5. We've got Kamala Harris. We've got Nikki Haley. The former leader of the World Bank, or the current leader of the World Bank, is Indian. He'd been in charge of MasterCard for a decade. And they are more numerous and they're more successful, and they come to us and we don't suspect them of anything. And we have parades on the street and are happy. Mike.
Isn't one of the candidates on the Republican side for president a second generation Indian?
Nikki Haley.
No. What's his name? Vivek.
Oh, the guru, the tech guru with the long name.
Yeah, he's
yeah. I don't know much about him.
But he's a second. He has to be second generation, at least, because you can't be a naturalized citizen to run for president.
Yeah. I don't know his name. We'll keep an eye on him. So China looks around at how they're being cornered, as in their game of Go, and they said, "Hey, wait a minute! This is an Asian NATO." Austin has been to Japan to help them develop counter-strike missiles that could reach mainland China. And he's been in intense discussion in India. It's not a NATO. It's a less formal NATO. There's an Article 5 that if any country's attacked, everybody goes to war. We don't have that. So in this new era, Xi has called for all hands on deck to struggle against foreign foes. So struggle is a Maoist word, right? The Cultural Revolution was all about struggle. And he talks about China's reemergence as a great power. And he calls us on, we're trying to contain China, just like we with George Kennan tried and successfully contain the Soviet Union. Well, he thinks she thinks we're trying to do the same with him. And the side benefit is if he can call wolf, that unites his country, unites the masses, and he can turn his state police with fury on any dissent because they could be saboteurs. And we've seen examples of that happening. So he's playing that card. And nationalism as a grievance is having a cultural influence in the movies. So I just want to review 3 movies. They're the Wolf Warrior. The first 2 are Wolf Warrior movies, and the Western diplomats have taken to saying that Chinese aggressive diplomacy is Wolf Warrior diplomacy. So what is a Wolf Warrior? So Wolf Warriors are they're like Rambos, but more patriotic, I suppose. Wolf Warrior 2 is the highest grossing Chinese film ever. I think Star Wars grossed more, but it was an American movie. So it's making a big splash in China. Wolf Warrior 2 was submitted to the Academy Awards for foreign language. And the adventurer from Wolf Warrior 1 winds up wandering aimlessly in Africa, where he is asked, why don't you be a mercenary and work for a ruthless mercenary who happens to be an American, but they're doing something good. They're helping get relief supplies to Africa. And then there's something, I won't go into, I haven't seen it, and I'm just trying to summarize what I've read, but there's something in the plot about Somalia pirates and defeating them, and hand-to-hand combat underwater. But then there's a confrontation between the American Big Daddy, and the conflict is that, wait a minute, no Chinese can be harmed. And by the way, we can't take action until the United Nations Security Council approves action. That's a dig, no doubt, at our behavior in Iraq, where we took action without the United Nations. And there's a big battle, and our hero confronts the American the Big Daddy, and so on and so forth. It's missed. The plot of this is dumbed down to just straightforward, oh, this is Chinese warmongering. No, it was more complicated. There, in fact, is another American, an American doctor who is helping with the evacuation. And the Chinese warships turn up, and they're going to help maintain the peace from the bad Somalis, but they're waiting for the United Nations Security Council. And so there's some good things that happen in that plot. It's not all bad, but this next one is bad. This is Born to Fly, just came out last month. It was backed by the People's Liberation Army, and it said to normalize the conflict with America, normalize killing Americans. And it's doing great at the box office. the Communist Party have been bussing in people to showings of this. So this is not just a private sector creation. The government is in on this, and it normalizes battling America. The heroes test these new stealth fighters, and some of them lose their lives. Think Right Stuff and or Chuck Yeager. Think the risks that our test pilots took in the Right Stuff. And they are the pilots in this movie are told that they have to go fight a technological blockade and containment strategy. Sound familiar? That's exactly what we've been accused of. And she calls for self-reliance. Somebody, Homer.
Yeah, if you've seen Top Gun 2, they don't name the other country, but they sure look Chinese. The ones that
Get shot down.
they get shot down at the end of the movie. Yeah. So this sounds like a response to Top Gun 2.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, there's another comparison to Top Gun 1. You anticipate my slides. I love it, Homer. We must be on the same wavelength. This Chinese movie, the third one, is closer to the spirit of our first Top Gun. They say it adds nationalistic grievance, but there's no sex. That's the difference. But 1986 showed obnoxious young pilots helping hegemonic America enforce its will without the niceties of international law. By the way, where was W. Bush, who famously ignored international law? He was in the Air Force Reserve. I'm just saying. So life imitates art, and last week we talked about the incidences at sea where these Chinese pilots are buzzing and to the extent of visibly shaking our planes. Unnecessary aggressive maneuvers, but they've learned that. This is part of the Chinese pattern of increasing confrontational behavior in their backyard. So are there any questions? I've got about another 5 minutes, so let me bite off this crisis of confidence. Is this kind of propaganda enough for young Chinese? And there's some indication that it's not, that this is not working, and that there is a crisis of confidence among young Chinese. These Chinese scholars have come out with a book talking about the 5 paradoxes of the young people in China. And when I say young people, those born after 1990, that there's a gap between patriotism and what they expect from society. They're sensitive to inequality. And especially rural inequality. Provincial Chinese just don't have the chance that urban Chinese do. And it was partially in this sentiment against private capital and profit that powered Xi's co-prosperity campaign. And it may relate to the falling population, that there's a lack of a belief, sufficient belief in their country, that they're not getting married and they're not having children. And no matter what the all-powerful Communist Party does, they haven't been able to move the needle.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead.
So
I'm gonna go ahead and.
I'm gonna. This is probably a pretty good place to stop. I'll I could come back to this next time. Are there any questions?
Not getting the young people, they haven't had enough time to enjoy the prosperity of capitalist wealth, you know. I mean, we have had it.
They're so cute. They love playing in the backyard.
Years or something like
There's
that.
Yeah.
there's some background noise going on here, the conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat what Aiko said. So Aiko, there may be other sources of noise. Aiko has the floor. Might be you, Michael. Something's going on. Aiko's point is that our country has been affluent really since the 50s. We were the only industrial power unaffected by the war, and we just cashed in. So our generation in particular has caught a wave of prosperity. Aiko's question is, has China been prosperous enough to turn their, is it too early for them to turn their back on material wealth? Well, apparently the kids born in the 90s, who I think they were born under the one-child policy, so they're single kids, maybe a little bit spoiled, and they have enjoyed 20 to 30 years of prosperity, and they're kind of turning their back the same way our generation maybe did in the 70s. So I'd answer, yeah, it looks like if these two guys are correct in their analysis of the paradoxes and the concern about inequality, and especially the difference between rural and urban, which we have in our country, right? It shakes out a little bit different politically. Yeah, they have been prosperous long enough.
They've been thrown in jail for
Thanks, John.
The question, I'll repeat the question. So have these two academics been thrown in jail? And the answer is no. No, they haven't. Not yet. Well, we'll keep an eye on Fu Yu and Yu Young.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, this just makes me think about the crisis of belief, leading many to shun marriage and decline to have children. I think we may be on the verge of seeing that in our young people. It's more over despair over lack of action on climate change than it is which is a kind of failure of the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the pessimism. Why raise kids grow up in such a world. Yipes. Yeah.
Well, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Okay,
Thank you so much,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank
My-
you, John.
my pleasure.
John, a question
Yeah,
I came up with is I've have some friends left over from my Borneo days that I've stayed in contact with, and one of the fellows on their WhatsApp, they had a video shown of a guy walking through San Francisco, and basically the way San Francisco looks today. I don't know, have you been downtown at all recently?
Yes.
yes,
It looks awful.
Well,
Yeah.
it is it's pretty grim, and what it is it basically it shows this guy walking from essentially down up Powell Street, and showing all of the storefronts that have been are abandoned now, and basically the stores that are still there, they have armed guards at the and their police presence is all over everywhere, having a mobile station on. He actually gets up to Union Square and talking about how some of the hotels up there are basically they're being abandoned, and so it was actually pretty amazing. And this is what obviously they're showing. This was a WhatsApp a video shown to kind of to our Asian friends anyway.
yeah. Next week, I'm finally going to get to a San Francisco politician, Scott Wiener, and we do have a resident of San Francisco with us, so maybe we can get him to comment. But I was mentioning this to somebody else about the vacancy rate in San Francisco and the businesses. So I think it's, they're only 39% occupied or something ridiculous. And I was told, don't worry, artificial intelligence is coming, and San Francisco is the center. And maybe artificial intelligence will tell us how to clean up our streets in San Francisco.
Yeah, but at the same time, you got the Westfield Center that's been shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, what's interesting is that this is a YouTube video, which I maybe will I'll send on to you, John, to take a look at. But it's what they're showing as far as San Francisco being the murder capital of the world now, and and the police presence, and how.
But we're not the murder capital of the world. We actually have pretty low murder rates compared to.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so that was an overstatement, no question, Homer. But what was interesting is it just basically how there's just nobody around. That was kind of what was interesting to me. So are you nearby? Homer, you're out here somewhere, aren't you too?
No, I'm in the city.
You're in the city.
Yeah, West Portal. It's a neighborhood. It's west of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, okay.
We don't feel the collapse of downtown very much. I mean, there's
Our neighborhood.
we do have some storefronts closed on our shopping street, and we have more aggressive panhandlers and apparently most people than we used to.
Yeah, that's really what this video shows. It's kind of like I guess I haven't been down for a long time too. My son lives in the Mission, and they've been all right, except for the shootings on 24th Street and that kind of stuff. So, any rate, it's weird to see that, and to see Union Square and just basically there's nobody around. It was pretty.
That is shocking.
Yeah, so I think a part of this is political, right? They had a district attorney that was super idealistic and liberal, and you could see it coming. And one a member of the commentariat wrote a book called San Francisco that documented, and it made, like, I think, Atlantic's the top list of the book list. And I heard an interview with the guy, and it was pretty interesting. But we're going to get back to the history of California, and we'll look at the San Francisco's history of tolerance, which is a thing, and maybe fed into this a little bit. We haven't forgotten the history of California, folks.
We still got Cabrillo and stuck in San Diego.
Yeah.
Cabrillo in San Diego will make a comeback next week.
Okay, thanks. That's a problem.
Along with Scott Wiener.
Yeah, okay.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
Thanks again.
All right.
You know, when I was in the city, it was 2 weeks ago,